Hi, my name is George Coles, and I am an avid retro video game collector.
Do a barrel roll!
I have decided to document my journeys as I grow my collection. Please join me as I share with you my finds. Welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. Hi everybody, and welcome to Retro Game Treasure Hunting. My name is George Coles, and let's jump right into it with my newest pickups. First one out the box, Die Hard Trilogy for the PlayStation 1. Now, or PSX, or just PlayStation, however you call it. Now, this game is pretty decently priced. I got it, as you can see, I get the greatest hits ones too. I don't mind if it's a black box or green box or systems. I'm mainly buying these games to play them for the fun of them, and this is a game I actually had back when it initially came out. I really enjoyed it, so when I seen it, I scooped it up right away. The interesting thing about this game is it's actually 3 games packed into one. The first being based off the first Die Hard movie, where it's a third-person shooter. The second one, based off of Die Harder, the second Die Hard movie, which is a rail shooter, which, if you're not familiar, kind of like Time Crisis, where you don't actually move your character, which actually works best with a light gun, but it still works pretty decent with a controller. And the last game in this is Die Hard with a Vengeance, based off of that, and it's you're in a car trying to defuse bombs throughout New York City. Think kind of like a Twisted Metal meets Destruction Derby kind of thing. So, some pretty cool value to it for getting 3 different games in one. Now, I've read a lot of reviews and seen a lot of reviews over the years of this that say that it's got 3 games, but none of them really could be a standalone. And I disagree with that. I think the Die Hard game is not the best shooter. It's pretty ho-hum. That would be the only one of the 3 that I would say couldn't stand alone. The Die Harder, the rail shooter, definitely could have been sold as a standalone game, and it definitely could have been something that you would purchase outside of this basic compilation, I guess you could say it. And I think it would be an excellent buy still. If this was just that, I probably would buy this disc for that. And the Die Hard with a Vengeance, the driving game, that, it still to me has some value. I don't think, it may not be something you would look at as a standalone game, which is probably why it's packed in here. But I think it could have sold well. It could have been something that you would have purchased as maybe a value game. With all that being said, I think this is a really fun game. It's a more bang for your buck kind of thing, especially if you still have a CRT TV and you still have access to using a light gun with them. I would buy this just for the Die Harder. I think it's one of the best rail shooter games of this era. With all that being said, let's jump right into our ratings for this. Now, graphic-wise, I'm going to give this a 2 out of 5, and by the way, we rate everything on a 1 to 5 scale. I give it a 2. The first game, Die Hard, is the stinker of the 3. It's got the worst of the 3 graphics. The other 2, pretty much on par with what you would see out of the PlayStation this era. With a Vengeance is a little bit inferior when compared to something like Twisted Metal. But again, you got to remember they packed 3 games onto one system, onto one disc, whereas Twisted Metal and games like Destruction Derby are their own single games. So I give them a little bit of a pass on that. Gameplay-wise, I give it a 4, just basically because you have 3 different styles of games, and all 3 of them are pretty fun. And yes, I keep bragging on the first game not being my favorite of the 3, but it's still a decent game to play through. Difficulty, I give it a 4. Obviously, there's some issues. The first one is the hardest of the 3. If you're familiar with rail shooters, you'll go right through the second one, and the third one's pretty simple, but altogether I give it a 4. I think there is some fun to it, some definite challenge to the game. Replay value, I give it a 4, basically because of that. You've got 3 different games you can play here, so if you're in the mood to play a Twisted Metal style driving game, you got that. If you're in the mood for a rail shooter, you have that. If you're in the mood for a third-person shooter, you have that as well. Music, I give it an incomplete, because the music and ambient sound, ambient music to the game, is mostly missing. So I can't really give them a yes or no on that. I'd like to have seen some of maybe the movie scores being used in this, but that's basically nitpicking at this point. Overall, I give the game a 4. I think it's something that you should buy. I would definitely purchase it, especially since it seems to be something that's a value purchase now. Definitely recommend picking this up. Now, next up, if you have a PlayStation collection and you don't have this game and you don't plan on having this game, pause this video because I want you to come back and, and watch the rest of it, but go out and get this right away. And that is Final Fantasy VII for the PlayStation. Now, I knew when I started going on this journey to get these games that this was a game I had to have. This is a top 10 game all time. It's not my favorite of the Final Fantasy series. However, it has such significance in not just that series, but also with the PlayStation. This was a system seller. This is the definitive role-playing game of the system, and there are some great role-playing games. Suikoden, Wild Arms, to name a few off the top of my head. Obviously, the Final Fantasy games that came out for it. I absolutely love this game. I think it's an amazing game. I probably like Final Fantasy VIII a little bit better personally, but this game is so good. I think if you're a collector of video games at all, if you're starting a PlayStation collection, if you're a role-playing game purchaser, you need this in your collection. You need to have this. No, I don't think anybody's PlayStation library is complete without this game. And if you're looking just to play it and trying to keep on the value side, it is a kind of pricey game. You can get it around $20, $30. There is a greatest hits version, which is a little bit cheaper. And I understand, I get you. I look for the value too. It's also something that's coming out, or has came out now, or will come out probably by the time you watch this, because it's coming out in like 2 days. The PlayStation Classic includes this, so if you're looking for value, it is on there as well. Again, I really could do an hour-long video on this, but I want to keep it kind of brief so I can move on and show you what else I've purchased. So we're going to jump right into the ratings for this. Graphic-wise, I give it a 3. It's ambitious with as much gameplay as there is. I understand why there were graphical limitations. It doesn't age well at all. You're playing this for the gameplay, really, and you're playing it for everything else involved. And so, with that being said, gameplay, I give it a 5. Difficulty, I give this a 5. It is right there in the sweet spot where it's hard enough to challenge you, but not too hard that it frustrates you. I really enjoy the gameplay mechanics of this game. Replay value, I give it a 5. I've probably played through this game and maybe a dozen times over the years, if not more. I know when I first got it, originally with the PlayStation, I played through it 3 times within about a month period because I loved the game so much. And it was just so much fun, and it's something that you can always go back to, and it'll always be a fun game. Music-wise, I gave it a 5. I've mentioned it before on my reviews. Final Fantasy and their series have some of the best game music that's ever been produced. But to me, it's a toss-up between Final Fantasy series, the Castlevania series, and the Nintendo proprietary games. And I think all three of those categories, all three of them have pretty much the best track record for video game music there is. Overall, I give this game a 5. As you could tell, I'm gushing and gushing and gushing over it. Absolute classic. One of the best games that you can buy for the PlayStation. One of the best games you can buy, period, in my opinion. And I think this is definitely a must-buy if you're going to be a PlayStation owner, a role-playing game owner, a Final Fantasy collector. It knocks off a lot of categories. That being said, we're going to go with one of its, actually, a prequel. Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII. Yes, I do have a problem, and yes, I'm willing to admit it. This is for the PlayStation Portable, and I don't know why this box is on, but let me open it just a bit. This is an absolutely fantastic game, and I love this. If you've seen a few videos back, I just got a PlayStation Portable for the first time, and this is one of the reasons why I got the system. I played this as a ROM before, and I played through the game that way because I never intended on having a PlayStation Portable or PSP, but now that I'm more collecting these things and adding to my collection, I always kind of had a retro game collection, but now it's something that I'm more focusing on. It's something that I needed to have a physical version of, and I absolutely love this game. This game is fun. It's an action RPG, a little bit different than what you would expect out of Final Fantasy VII or some of the other Final Fantasy games, but it definitely has a unique fighting style that's different than most of the fighting game or most of the Final Fantasy games. I really enjoy this game. I think it's definitely, again, it's probably one of the better games for the PSP, and it's easily something that you should go out and pick up, and especially, again, if you like role-playing games, if you're collecting for the PlayStation Portable, this is where you should be looking. You should be looking to pick this up. With that being said, let's jump into the ratings for this. Graphic-wise, I give this a 5. This still looks good today. I mean, I would put this up against a lot of this generation games. It still is fun to play. It still looks fantastic. Gameplay value, I give it a 5. I think there's a lot of fun to be had. There's a lot to it. It's not just a simple cash grab kind of game, although it sounds like it could be. Difficulty, again, I give it a 5. Final Fantasy and the whole series seems to get it right and get it into that sweet spot where it's difficult enough to give you a challenge, but not too difficult to frustrate you. Replay value, I give it a 5 again. Like I said with Final Fantasy VII, these games are games that you're going to play. If I live to be 80, I'm going to play them another 20, 30, 40 times over by the time I pass away. And these are games you could always jump back into and always have tons of fun with. Again, like I said with Final Fantasy, music-wise, they knocked it out of the box. I give this music-wise, I give it a 5. I think it's still amazing. It sounds beautiful. Square knocks it out of the park on their music for Final Fantasy games. And overall, I give this a 5 again. I think this is an absolute must-have if you're a PlayStation Plus collector or PSP collector, or if you're a Final Fantasy collector or a role-playing collector. Definitely pick this up. Now, next up, and this is a very PlayStation-centric video, I have a PlayStation long box game, and I wanted to get some of these because I got PlayStation early. This is Descent, and the reason I want to get some of these is just I love the stylistically. I kind of wish they stayed with this, but it would be a nightmare for storage purposes because they're huge. And it's obviously easier just to stick something into a CD case and roll with that. But this, to me, I just love the look and the feel of these giant long box PlayStation games. And Descent is one of the quintessential early games in the PlayStation catalog. This is a shooting game or a flying game, depending on how you say would consider it. It does have some levels of, it has some puzzle to it. The main thing that makes this different from a lot of the shooters, even to this day, is you have 6 degrees of motion. Now, if you don't know what that means you can go up, down, left and right, and also forwards and back, which is kind of disorienting, but it adds a little bit of level of fun to it. To me, I think, I think it's pretty cool, and there is some really fun things to it. It's made by Interplay, which is a really good developer, especially in this era. And I just really enjoy this game. It was something that was fun, and with the price tag, I think it was $6. It's definitely a value purchase, and it's going to give me, it's worth the value of it. A lot of it, there is some things that are going to feel a little bit dated to it, and I understand that, being it's almost a 25-year-old game at this point. So there is that, but it's still a fun game to pick up and play. With that being said, let's go into our ratings on this. Graphic-wise, I give it a 4. It looks as good as anything did early in the PlayStation lifespan, and even compared to games that came out in the life cycle, it still holds up pretty well. Gameplay, I give it a 4. Other than the disorienting bits of it, it is a really fun game to play. They do have a challenge where the AI seems to learn your patterns and adjusts to that, so you can't just play it one way. You constantly have to change up your strategy, which I kind of enjoy that they do that they kind of use the extra power for that. Difficulty, I give it a 3. This game isn't too hard to get into, and a lot of these shooters or flying games, whatever you consider them, don't have a ton of difficulty. They're just, go here, shoot this, go here, shoot this. So there is that. It would be made a lot easier if there was a better mapping system. I don't think there's any, matter of fact, I know there's no mapping in it, so if they had some sort of mapping system to go with the way it's a little bit disorienting, like I said, you could rotate in a total circle, so sometimes you don't know where you're at, and you end up going back or backtracking, not on purpose. Replay value, I give it a 3. I think it's something, you're not going to play this as much as one of the Final Fantasy games, but you are going to pick it up and you are going to enjoy it. So I think you'll go back after a while, you're going to want to play something like this again, and you're going to jump back into it and still enjoy it. Music, I give it a 2. It's kind of dated. It does have some cool stuff, like they use Typo Negative and Ogre for the soundtrack, but it kind of feels dated and 90s, very 90s to it, which I'm okay with. I like a lot of 90s music. It's the generation I was a teenager in, so I do enjoy some of that, but to me, still feels a little bit dated, a little bit as it is. So I give that a 2 for the music. Overall, I think this is a good game. Again, one of the major selling points is it's a long box game. It's a value title. It's definitely worth picking up for if you see it less than $10. Overall, I give it a 3. I think it's a good game. It's an early system game, and I enjoy it. And I think this is really, really a cool game to own, and especially, like I said, I enjoy this long box. And there's different versions. This is a more cardboard one. But they have other ones where it's got kind of the Sega CD look, where it's just looks like a big CD jewel case, and there's different variants of the long box. This is the one I like with the ridge kind of thing here, which if you look, if you're not familiar with the thing, if you remember, there's a graphic, looks like there's ridges on there, and that's kind of what they were modeling it after. So you can see the design elements that carried over even when they went to that. Now, with that being said, as far as my reviews, that's the end of this video. I did pick up another game, but I didn't review it. I'm not going to review it because 2 reasons, and I'll explain that in a second. Donkey Kong for the Atari. Now, originally, as you can see how it says Coleco here, I thought this was a ColecoVision cartridge, but it's actually an Atari cart. And it's weird that it says that. And actually, it's made for Atari Video Computer System and the Sears computer, or Sears system. It said it here, I thought. There it is. Sears Video Arcade. I'm sorry. I was reading down here when it's up here. But the ColecoVision of Donkey Kong, ColecoVision version of Donkey Kong is actually pretty true to arcade. The Atari version, not so much. I got this. It was cheap. I think it was $5. I don't have an Atari to play it in. I didn't have a ColecoVision to play it in. But I bought it for what it is. It's Donkey Kong. I mean, it's a game that a lot of people of my age got into video games playing and loved playing and spent thousands of quarters playing. And I just thought it was a neat little purchase that I wanted to show you. I'm not going to review it because I don't even have an emulator for Atari. I don't plan on downloading one just to do this. I kind of got this as like a showpiece kind of thing, just to have it. Just to have an Atari game, and I actually thought it was a Coleco game, so both ways. I wanted to have it for a Coleco game in my system, or now an Atari game in my collection. Collection, I meant, not system. And just a nice little display piece, in my opinion. But I like it. I'm silly, I know. And with that being said, we'll do a quick recap here of what everything is, what we have. And guess what? That does not like to stand. Alright, so we have Descent. I say definitely get it if you could get it at a decent rate. Final Fantasy VII, buy this, buy this, buy this. Die Hard, again, much like Descent, if you could get it cheap, definitely pick it up. It's gonna be a value purchase. It's gonna be worth it. Crisis Core, almost called it Crystal Chronicles. Crisis Core is definitely another pickup I think you should make. And if you're an Atari collector, you should have this already. You should have Donkey Kong. But, and much like these, you should have these if you collect for these systems. These 2 are actually 3 I say are must-haves. These 2 are good value buys, so definitely check them out. Let me know what you think too. Also, if you're watching this, I asked this on my last video, and you have some suggestions of what you think I might like, please leave it down here in the comments. Let me know what you think of these games, if you played any of these, if you enjoy them, if you don't enjoy them. Let me know what you think. Hit me up. Also, make sure to pound that subscribe button, like and share. But basically, that's all I have to say on this. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Retro Game Treasure Hunting.